Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Text number 69. Ya Nisha Sarva Bhutanam Tasyam Jagarti Sangyami Yasyam Jagrati Bhutani Sa Nisha Pashito Mune Ya Nisha Sarva Bhutanam Tasyam Jagrati Sangyami Yasyam Jagrati Bhutani Na Sa Nisha Pashyato Mune Yaha what? Nisha is night. Sarva all. Bhutanam of living entities. Tasyam in that. Jagarti in wakeful. Samyami the self-controlled. Yasyam in which. Jagrati are awake. Bhutani all beings. Sa that is. Nisha night. Pashyataha for the introspective. Mune sage. What is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-controlled. And the time of awakening for all beings is night for the introspective sage. There are two classes of intelligent men. One is intelligent in material activities for sense gratification, and the other is introspective and awake to the cultivation of self-realization. Activities of the introspective sage or thoughtful man are night for persons materially absorbed. Materialistic persons remain asleep in such a night due to their ignorance of self-realization. The introspective sage remains alert in the quote-unquote night of the materialistic men. The sage feels transcendental pleasure in the gradual advancement of spiritual culture, whereas the man in materialistic activities, being asleep to self-realization, dreams of varieties of sense pleasure, feeling sometimes happy and sometimes distressed in his sleeping condition. The introspective man is always indifferent to materialistic happiness and distress. He goes on with his self-realization activities undisturbed by material reactions. Om Ajnanati Mirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Gadim Yat Kripa Taraham Bande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Paramanandamaravam Shri Chaitanyeshwaram. So, Lord Krishna, in this verse, is specifically talking about two types of persons. One is the ordinary living entity. Now when I say, the conditioned soul, let's say. Conditioned souls, and what we mean by conditioned soul is the persons who are interested in sense gratification. They feel life is meant to enjoy the senses, the conditioned soul. And then we have here mune, the word mune, and it's referred to as sage, and Srila Prabhupada refers to this person as the introspective sage. One who introspects, he looks internally and tries to understand the nature of a thing. In other words, they try to understand what this life is meant for. What is life all about, right? And some people think that life is simply meant to have a family, and raise your family, and that's the most important thing. In other words, procreation is the goal of life. But that's not necessarily what the Vedic literature say, because in procreation, I mean dogs and cats and even pigs, they're procreating, but are they engaged in the ultimate goal of life? No. The animalistic propensities are there in human beings also. They eat, they sleep, they mate, they defend. But those activities are there in animals. So what is special about the human form of life? What in the human form of life, what does one have to be or do to be a muni, or sage, or someone who's introspective about this life, right? Generally people think a muni is someone who lives in the mountains and he has a big beard and a jettiya, matted locks. He's the muni, but not necessarily. Nowadays we see so many so-called sadhus, right? They're begging for money, and with that money they go buy one chai and one bidi, right? So is this what it means to be sadhu? Drinking chai, smoking bidi? No. It's not about your color of dress. It's not about your hairstyle. It's about an internal purification, an internal questioning. It begins by, why am I suffering in this world, and how do I end the suffering? No one can deny that in this material world there's so many different suffering situations. So a muni, or an introspective person, uses their life to try to solve the real problems of life, the real problems. Mostly people feel that the problem is an economic problem. I need money, right? In order to get money I have to work or do some business, right? And it becomes, as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the spiritual master of our spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, he said this world, this material world, is a place of cheaters and the cheated. Right? The factory owner is trying to get the workers to do more work, and the factory workers are trying to do less work. Cheaters and the cheated. So that's the material world. But we're saying that for those persons who are introspective and are trying to understand what is this life about, what is the goal of this life, they're not a part of that cheaters and the cheated world. They may be in it, but at the same time they're aloof from it, because they're thinking about more higher levels topics, higher level discussions. Huh? So what is night for the common man is a time of awakening for the introspective sage. Now in Maharashtra, they have a saying. If you sleep early in the morning, if you can sleep all morning, that's Parama Anand. Right? But we see in the life of devotees, they get up at 3:30, they take a bath and go to Mangalarti. How many people on the outside are, getting up early in the morning like that at 3:30 and taking bath? Not many, right? They're sleeping. But why do the devotees get up at that time? And what's their incentive, right? Because that's the best time for spiritual activities. It's called the Brahma Muhurta. The day is divided into different muhurtas, segments. And 1.5 hours before sunrise is the Brahma Muhurta. Brahma means spiritual, Brahman, that which is spiritual. So anything that you do spiritually at that time, you'll get a better result. So, the introspective sage will use that time early in the morning. But ordinary materialistic persons at that time, they'll be sleeping. Parama Anand, so-called. Right? Srila Prabhupada. So this, you see the difference why for the sage, that is a time of awakening. They're awake, they're active, they're chanting, they're reading, they're hearing the holy name of Krishna. Right? And for those who are not interested in these things, interested in sense gratification, they're asleep. I was reading in the paper the other day, the Times of India, there's a big move to make Bombay a nightlife city, a city of nightlife. Right now, the hotels, restaurants, bars, they have to close at 1 o'clock. Right? So there is a discussion going on with the municipality, the BMC, that the bars should stay open 24 hours a day. 24 hours, right? So you can see, and there's so many people that are encouraging the government to give permission so the bars can stay open 24 hours. 1 o'clock is not enough, right? What kind of a life is that? They stay out all night, right? And if you tell them to get up at 3:30, right? They're just going home at 3:30. Come to the temple at 3:30. By that time they have a headache. They have to go home and sleep it off, right? So you see the difference in the life, right? For them, that's the life. That's the life. Uska jaan hai. 12 baje, 1 baje, 2 baje tak. Uska dosti ke saath batchit chal raha hai. Uska life, uska jaan hai. But for the devotees of the Lord, they think this is a hellish life. Wasting their life. Drinking, hanging out in bars. Huh? So this is activity in the mode of ignorance. Whereas the introspective sage, the Muni, they use the facilities that are there to increase their understanding about what is important in this life. What is actually the purpose of this life. And they appreciate the time. They don't want to waste it. And the best way to use one's time and not waste time, according to Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, is to manmana bhava madbhakto, is to think of Krishna and become his devotee. It's the best use of our time. Think of Krishna and become his devotee. When a person is taking, everyone has to take shelter of something in this world. People take shelter. Generally people take shelter of their family. They take shelter of their community. Sundar Bombay, Marathi Mumbai, or the Gujarati Samaj, Aujo. But can these things, are these things a real shelter though? Right? They appear to be a shelter. But in the end, they can't really help us, can they? Whether I'm an American, or I'm a Russian, or I'm Indian, Gujarati, Marathi, death comes for everyone. I may have a very aristocratic family that I'm coming from, a big family, right? Tradition. But at the time of death, how will they help me? Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Sarva dharmam parityaja mamekam saranam braja aham tvam savipapebhyo mokshashishyami ma sujaha. Just surrender unto me. I'll protect you. Don't fear. Right? Don't worry about the dharmas. Right? Because in one sense, it's true, we've taken birth in a particular family and we're taking so many facilities from the demigods. Varuna is supplying the water, Indra, Vayu, air, right? So we have a debt. If you take something from somebody, that means you owe them something, isn't it? So we're taking these things, sunlight, air, water, right? And they're supplied by the demigods through they're agents of Lord Krishna. We have, in our family, we take birth in a particular family and therefore we have the facility of a material body, so we have a debt to repay. Therefore, the Vedic prescription is that a householder performs these 5 kinds of different sacrifices. But for the devotee of the Lord who surrendered unto Krishna, and Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he's the master of all, everyone else is Krishna's servant. If we surrender to Krishna, then all of our obligations are taken care of. Just like if you have 1 lakh of rupees, then all your 100 rupee problems are over because you have 1 lakh, right? So, in the same way, whatever obligations we have, when we surrender to Lord Krishna, then all our obligations are fulfilled. But the problem is that we think that we have so many responsibilities other than surrendering to Krishna. I have my family, I have my job, I have my business, I have my education, etc., etc., etc. And the priority of surrendering Krishna, becoming an introspective sage, as it's described here in this verse number 69 of the Bhagavad Gita, that's not on a very high priority for us. Right? So, what Krishna is suggesting is that we use our time wisely, right? We have 24 hours in a day. So we should pull some time out of that 24 hours and keep it exclusively for cultivating Krishna consciousness, cultivating spiritual consciousness. And that's the sum and substance of this verse. Life is not meant for sense gratification. That even cats and dogs do. Life is meant for self-realization. And all of this idea that I'm going to become successful materially, even if you do it, it won't last. Why? Because you have to leave it. Right? So, parents have children, but they're only encouraging them in sense gratification. Now, that's not the duty of a parent, to simply encourage the kid in sense gratification. They're thinking, if my child becomes engineer, successful engineer, he'll earn a lot of money and I'll enjoy that money. It's only sense gratification. Real duty of a parent, real duty of any authority, is to see that the dependents become educated and trained in such a way that they don't have to take birth again in the material world. Because that is our real problem. We took birth here in the material world. We have to become old. We suffer from so many diseases. And then ultimately, we have to die. And nobody wants to die. Why don't you want to die? Why don't we want to die? Well, that's explained earlier in this same chapter of Bhagavad Gita. That we don't want to die because we're eternal. We're a spirit soul. And the soul is eternal. Just as God is eternal, we're also eternal. So what is the nature of a thing if it's eternal? It doesn't die. If something's eternal, it doesn't die. But because we're identifying with the material body, which is not eternal, it's temporary, and we're thinking this is me, and it's going to die, therefore we're threatened with non-existence at any moment. Yet if we realize that I'm not this body, I'm the soul, and that's what it means to be an introspective sage. It has nothing to do with your dress. You may have any dress, and you may do any work, but if you analyze about this life, whether I'm this body or not this body, what is the nature of the soul? What is my relationship with God? That's what it means to be introspective. That's what this chapter, this portion of chapter 2 is talking about. Someone who's stita pragya, right? Who's steadily thinking about the nature of this world, their own nature, their relationship to God. So, let us go to the next verse. This is text number 70. I'll just read the verse and then we'll chant together the word for word. Apuryamanam achala pristam sumudram aprapravishanti yadvat tadvat kamayang pravishanti sarve sa shantim apnoti na kamakami. Apuryamanam. always being filled. Achala pratistham, steadily situated. Samudram, the ocean. Apaha, waters. Pravishanti, yadvat, as. Tadvat, so. Kamaha, desires. Yam, unto whom. Pravishanti, enter. Sarve, all. Saha, that person. Shantim, peace. Apnoti, achieves. Na, not. Kamakamini, one who desires to fulfill desires. A person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. Although the vast ocean is always filled with water, it is always, especially during the rainy season, being filled with much more water, but the ocean remains the same. Already steady, it is not agitated, nor does it cross beyond the limit of its brink. That is also true of a person fixed in Krishna consciousness. As long as one has the material body, the demands of the body for sense gratification will continue. The devotee, however, is not disturbed by such desires because of his fullness. A Krishna-conscious man is not in need of anything because the Lord fulfills all his material necessities. Therefore, he is like the ocean, always full in himself. Desires may come to him like the waters of the rivers that flow into the ocean, but he's steady in his activities, and he's not even slightly disturbed by desires for sense gratification. That is the proof of a Krishna-conscious man, one who has lost all inclinations for material sense gratification, although the desires are present. Because he remains satisfied in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, he can remain steady, like the ocean, and therefore enjoy full peace. Others, however, who want to fulfill desires, even up to the limit of liberation, what to speak of material success, never attain peace. The fruitive workers, the salvationists, and also the yogis who are after mystic powers are all unhappy because of unfulfilled desires. But the person in Krishna consciousness is happy in the service of the Lord, and he has no desires to be fulfilled. In fact, he does not even desire liberation from the so-called material bondage. The devotees of Krishna have no material desires, and therefore they are in perfect peace. So the real advantage of being Krishna conscious is explained here. We have desires. That is the symptom of the living entity. They desire. Desire is there in God. He has desires. And the desire is there also in the living entity. But the difference is, the Lord's desires are not material. And the living entity's desires originally are also not material. But due to contact with the material nature, The living entity is trying to satisfy his desires in terms of sense gratification. Now, Krishna consciousness means to try to satisfy the desires of Krishna. Right? Krishna and Krishna's senses. Right? As long as we're trying to satisfy our own material senses, we will never feel fulfilled. We'll always feel there's something lacking. As soon as we give up that attempt to satisfy ourselves and we try to satisfy Krishna, immediately we can become full, like the ocean. Right? That's the example that Lord Krishna is giving here. The ocean, here in Juhu, we have the ocean nearby, and there's this Tana Creek that flows into the ocean, right? So the water is flowing into the ocean from so many different rivers. I think in Bombay also they have the Mitti River. So many rivers. But the ocean stays the same. It doesn't overflow its bank and flood everything. It stays there, right? So someone who's trying to satisfy the desires of Krishna, someone who's trying to work for the pleasure of Krishna, they become like the ocean. Desires may come, because that's natural, desires will come. But just as the ocean is not disturbed by so much water flowing into it, and in the rainy season even more water, the rivers swell up and more water is flowing into the ocean, but it remains steady. Stays within its bank. Once, Srila Prabhupada was walking on Juhu Beach. Srila Prabhupada would every day go to Juhu Beach. And he said once that I have 3 favorite places in the world. My garden in Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, California, Prabhupada has a little garden. He used to sit there and meet people. And my rooms in Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada's rooms in Vrindavan. And he said Juhu Beach. Those are his 3 favorite places in the world. So he used to take a walk there. So while he was walking, there were small birds near the ocean water. And they would go up to the water and then come back, the birds. And Srila Prabhupada said, you see, such a big, vast ocean, but the birds are not afraid. They're going near to the water because they know the ocean will keep its boundary. It will not come out. A Krishna's conscious person is like that. There may be so many desires coming. And in the beginning, the devotee tries to dovetail the desires with the service of Krishna. And the example Srila Prabhupada gives is that we all have a desire to eat various edibles, right? If we make nice preparations and offer them to Krishna for Krishna's pleasure, right? And then we accept Krishna's prasadam. See? If you try to just eat for your own pleasure without offering to Krishna, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that that's sinful. Sinful. Pop. But if you cook for Krishna and you offer it to Krishna, it's just like when people go to the Ganga. They go to the Ganga and then they take bath in the Ganga. And after they take bath, they take some water and offer it back to the Ganga. Right? What does the Ganga need with that palm full of water? The Ganga is filled with water. Right? But we're recognizing the sacredness, the utility of the Ganga by offering back its own water. And the same with foodstuffs. Where do foodstuffs come from? Rice, dal, sabji, chapati, right? They don't come from the factory. The government's making big arrangements for making factories. Hindukal aluminum factory. But you can eat aluminum. Srila Prabhupada said you can't eat nuts and bolts. What you eat comes from the ground. The ground is the earth. They called Mother Nature. Recently they had Earth Day, right? Mother Nature. So, is there possibility to have mother without father? No. As soon as you say mother, Mother Nature is so bountiful. She's giving everything. What we wear, what we eat, what we breathe, what we drink, it's all coming from mother. What about father? That they forget. The energy of this world is Krishna's energy. So by cooking for Krishna, he doesn't need our puris, our sabji. He doesn't need that. Right? Just like the Ganges, she doesn't need that handful of water. But we're offering it back. If a man goes to work, and before he goes to work, his child brings his shoes, he becomes very happy. Oh, my shoes he brought. Right? He can just as well get his own shoes. He doesn't need the child to bring his shoes. But when he sees the child is bringing the shoes, he becomes inclined towards that child. Is it not? In the same way, Krishna's not requiring anything from us. He's Atmanama, self-satisfied. He has everything he needs. But when he sees that when we do something out of love for him, then he becomes inclined. You see, my devotee. And when Krishna thinks, oh, this is my devotee, then we become fully protected. Either we're under his protection, or we're under the jurisdiction of the material nature. You have to surrender somewhere. Either we surrender to Krishna, or we have to surrender to his material energy. If we surrender to the material energy, what is the result? If we surrender to Krishna, what is the result? That we should analyze. That's why Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, so that we could be introspective and understand what is the result of surrendering to Krishna, what is the result of taking shelter of Krishna's material energy. Two different results. That's why we're having this discourse, so that we can analyze carefully what is the end result. Krishna says, think of me, become my devotee. What is the result of that? Surrender unto me. Krishna is asking us to surrender. And we're not listening. We don't have time. We have time for so many things. We have time for sleeping, we have time for eating, we have time for cinema, we have time for television, we have time for the newspaper. But for Krishna, no time. You can try yourself. Try to chant Hare Krishna and don't think of anything else. Just think of the mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. Very quickly the mind will give you so many other things to think about than just the mantra. So many things. Because the mind is conditioned. It's not purified. Right? It's contaminated by so many past material thoughts. And when you try to chant Hare Krishna, the mind is like a wild animal. It wants to get away. You've captured it by the sound vibration, right? If you capture a wild animal, it'll struggle to get away. So the mind is just like a wild animal. What does a wild animal do? It does whatever it wants, right? If you put a wild animal in a cage, it's not very happy. So by chanting Hare Krishna, we're cornering the wild animal mind, and it's struggling to get away. So the mind is very powerful. In the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna tells Arjuna how to do Dhyan Yoga, controlling the mind. And what did Arjuna say? After hearing the whole 6th chapter, he said, "My dear Lord, it appears very difficult to me." Right? Like trying to control the wind is to control the mind. And who is Arjuna? He's Krishna's friend. So qualified to be Krishna's friend. And he says it's difficult. What to speak of us? Right? And Krishna acknowledges, yes, it's difficult, but it's highly possible. Why? How? By practice and detachment. Practice. 2 things. Practice and detachment. So as we go on practicing, doing things for the pleasure of Krishna, it can be something small. Before I ever met devotees, before I ever had a spiritual master, right, I had a Back to Godhead magazine and it said, do something for the pleasure of Krishna. So I took a flower from a garden and I used to offer one flower to the picture of Krishna. Right? I didn't know, just the idea came. Right? So it can be something small, but we do it for the pleasure of Krishna. Krishna notices that. Right? And gradually the mind can become controlled. The mind is also Krishna's energy. Just like the earth is Krishna's energy. Bhumir, Apo, Nalo, Vayu. Earth, water, fires, ether, these are Krishna's energies. In the same way, mind is his energy. Intelligence is the hankar is his energy. Right? So all can easily be controlled, even though it's very difficult. And Krishna also says in the Bhagavad Gita, Daivyeshu gunamai mama maya duratya mama vyad prapadyante mayamitam tarantite. That this Daivyesha, this material energy is very difficult to overcome. Duratya, very difficult. Tarantite, he says very easily. In the same verse. How? Surrender. If you surrender, if you offer your mind to Krishna, offer your food to Krishna, offer whatever you have for the pleasure of Krishna, then Krishna takes charge and the material energy is nothing in front of Krishna. Right? So that's the process. That's what's being discussed here. For the introspective person, they become full with desires to serve Krishna. Therefore, they're not disturbed by whatever other desires may come. They can be callous to them. They can understand that other desires other than desires, other than to serve Krishna, they're insignificant. They come and they go. Because the real focus is on pleasing Krishna. So, are there any questions at this point? Yeah.
Why we debate about Krishna for everyone to get self-actualization? My understanding was everyone starts with the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So some people who are so unfortunate, they don't have even the basic means to meet their basic needs. Forget about the wants. So you start with your basic needs and then go up and achieve self-actualization finally. How do these people surrender themselves to Krishna?
Well, look at Sudama Brahman. He had no means. And his wife knew that he was a good friend of Krishna. So she said, you go to Krishna and ask him, because we have nothing here. So Sudama, he said, he thought in his mind, I don't want to ask my friend for anything, but I'd like to see my friend. So he went. Why? Not to ask for anything, because he was a pure devotee. Whatever condition is a pure devotee, he's happy with that. But he went just to see Krishna, and his wife insisted, so he went. And she gave him some chura. What do you call it? Poa. Sukha. Poa. And he went. And he was so happy to meet Krishna. And when Krishna saw him, he put him on his own bed. He called Lakshmi. They worshipped him in Dwarka, because he's a Brahmin. And Sudama was so happy to be with Krishna. He never thought to even ask for anything. But then Krishna said, what you brought me? And he got that poa, and he began to eat. He took one bite. He tried to take another bite, and Lakshmi came and stopped his hand. He said, you have made me so indebted to this Brahmin by that one bite. If you take another bite, that'll be too much indebted. Don't. Right? Still, Sudama never asked for anything. He just went home. But all the way home he was thinking, oh, I saw Krishna, and it was so nice to be with Krishna again after so many years. They were remembering how they were in Sandipani Muni's ashram. Right? But when he got home, he entered the place, he saw that there was a big palace there. And so many servants. And his wife was dressed in a valuable sari. Even though he never asked for anything. So that's the opulence of Krishna's devotee. They don't want anything, but Krishna supplies everything. When Srila Prabhupada went to America, he only had 40 rupees. Only 40 rupees. He didn't know anybody. Nobody. An old man, 70 years old, went by boat, had 2 heart attacks on the boat. He got off the boat, didn't know whether to go right or left. Only he had faith in Krishna. And within a very short time, he made 108 temples all over the world. So how is it possible? By devotion to Krishna. So what's more important? You say that because one doesn't have the necessities of life, they should work for the necessities of life and worry about devotion later. But rather, Krishna says, you work for devotion and I'll take care of all your necessities of life. So what do you want to do? Having faith in the words of Krishna, this is what it means to be introspective, to be a sage, to be a muni. It doesn't mean, sadhu with lal kapra and jatiya and dari. That the point is faith in Krishna's words. This is what it means to be muni. Krishna says, I carry what they lack, yoga, shemam vaham yaham. I preserve what they have, I carry what they lack. It's all a matter of having faith in the words of Krishna. That's why every Wednesday night we're having this Bhagavad Gita class, so that people can understand what is Krishna's instruction and try to apply it in their lives. Hare Krishna. Any other questions? Yes?
Compare Christian with God, because you told us the example of Bhakti, devotees and God, that Christians are always in limited position, but God, there is no limitation with God. How we can compare God with Christians?
Well, it's just sometimes we do compare the ocean with God, right? Because Srila Prabhupada gives the example that the living entity is a part of God, and just as if you take a drop of water from the ocean, that will be salty like the whole ocean. And because the living entity is part of God, so as God is eternal, full of knowledge, full of bliss, Sat Chit Ananda, the living entity is also Sat Chit Ananda. But because the drop of water, although it's the same salty like the ocean, same substance, is very small. So the living entity is very small compared to God. Although having the same qualities of God, God is very great, like the ocean. And the living entity is very small, like a drop of the ocean. The living entity is Anu, and the Lord is Vibhu. Very great. That's the difference. So sometimes Srila Prabhupada gave that comparison for our understanding. And even Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, of bodies of water, I am the ocean. In Bhagavad Gita he says that. Of fishes, I am the shark. Of seasons, I am the spring. So these are vibhuti understandings, are examples of Krishna. Some very wonderful thing, where does it come from? It comes from Krishna. So in that sense, it's non-different from Krishna. But at the same time, Krishna is something else, something even more than that. Is that okay?